My name is Madeline Reeves. And when I was 19, I sat at my parents' kitchen table with tears in my eyes and asked one simple question. Can you help me with tuition? My father's answer came without hesitation. Be independent. Heartbreak graduation cap. My mother nodded. Nobody helped us. That night, I packed my bags. Worked 3 jobs. Graduated with debt. And learned never to ask again. 9 years later, my phone rang, and my mother's trembling voice said, Madeline, we need you. I almost hung up, until she whispered 4 words that froze my heart. Your brother disappeared, and suddenly, the family that taught me independence was begging for something only I could give. My name is Madeline Reeves. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. My father, Gerald Reeves, owned a hardware store. My mother, Nancy Reeves, believed hardship built character. And my younger brother, Caleb Reeves, was the center of everyone's world. I wasn't unloved. I was simply expected to survive. Caleb, meanwhile, was protected from everything. When he failed classes, Dad blamed teachers. When he wrecked cars, Mom blamed stress. When he quit jobs, they called him misunderstood. But when I graduated high school with honors and earned admission to Northwestern University, I faced a problem. Tuition. Scholarships covered most expenses, but I still needed help. Just once. So I asked. Dad put down his coffee. Mom crossed her arms, and Dad said, Be independent. Mom smiled proudly. You'll appreciate success more. I nodded. But inside, something broke. Because 6 months earlier, they had bought Caleb a brand new truck. I never complained. I simply left. For the next 9 years, I worked. Waitress. Tutor. Night shifts. Internships. Anything. I graduated. Built a career in cybersecurity. Started my own consulting company. And slowly, life rewarded me. I bought a home. Built savings. And learned to stop expecting family. Meanwhile, calls from home became fewer. Birthdays forgotten. Holidays awkward. Eventually, silence. And strangely, I made peace with it. Then one Sunday morning, everything changed. Mom called. Crying. Actually crying. Her voice trembled. Madeline, we need you. I nearly ignored it. But then she whispered. Your brother disappeared. Apparently Caleb had vanished 3 weeks earlier. No calls. No texts. Nothing. Dad sounded broken. The strong man who once preached independence now sounded 70 years old. Against my better judgment, I flew home. The house looked smaller. Older. Dad hugged me. For the first time in years. Mom cried. And I realized something shocking. They weren't arrogant anymore. They were scared. Then I learned the truth. Caleb had accumulated gambling debts. Massive debts. Nearly $400,000. He'd secretly mortgaged Dad's store. Sold Mom's jewelry. Borrowed money from dangerous people. And then disappeared. Dad's health had declined. Mom's savings were gone. Everything they'd spent 30 years building was collapsing. And suddenly I understood. The golden child had destroyed everything. Still, I helped. Not with money. With strategy. I hired investigators, attorneys, financial advisors. Weeks later, we found Caleb. In Nevada. Broken. Drunk. Terrified. He cried when he saw me. Not because he missed me. Because he had nowhere left to go. I wanted screaming. I wanted anger. But instead, I saw fear. The same fear I had felt at 19. So I brought him home. Rehabilitation followed. Therapy followed. Debt negotiations followed. And slowly, our family began rebuilding. Then one evening, Dad sat beside me. His eyes filled with tears. And said words I'd waited 9 years to hear. I failed you. I froze. He continued. We thought toughness made people strong. Mom cried. Dad shook. And then he admitted something painful. They had invested everything emotionally into Caleb because they feared he'd fail. And because I seemed capable. They assumed I didn't need them. They mistook strength for invincibility. And independence for lack of pain. Then Mom whispered. You needed us too. I broke down. Because all those years, that was all I'd wanted. Not money. Not tuition. Just acknowledgement. Months later, Caleb changed. Really changed. He got sober. Found work. Started attending therapy. And one afternoon he surprised me. He handed me a box. Inside were receipts. Every dollar he'd borrowed from mom. Every piece of jewelry he'd sold. He was repaying everything, slowly, honestly. Then he looked at me and said, "They gave me everything, and I wasted it. They gave you nothing, and you built everything. I want to become the kind of person you are." I cried harder than I expected. Because for the first time, my brother saw me, really saw me. Years passed. Dad retired. Mom gardened. Caleb married a wonderful woman. And one Christmas Eve, Dad handed me a small envelope. Inside was an old receipt. My college tuition statement from 9 years earlier. Attached was a note. Too late to help then. Not too late to say sorry. And underneath, a check. Not because I needed it, but because he needed to make things right. I never cashed it. Instead, I framed the note. Because forgiveness mattered more than money. Today, that framed letter hangs in my office. And whenever young students ask me for career advice, I tell them something my parents learned too late. Strong people need love too. Independent people need support too. And just because someone doesn't complain, doesn't mean they aren't hurting. Because sometimes, the child who asks for the least, needs the most. Never assume that the strongest person in the family doesn't need support. Love should never be based on who appears more capable. And it's never too late to admit mistakes and rebuild relationships. If this story touched your heart, thumbs up, like this video. Bell, subscribe to Untold Heart Stories for more emotional family drama stories. Speech balloon, comment below. What would you do if your parents refused to help you when you needed them, but came back years later asking for your help? Crying heartbreak, graduation cap phone.